Thank you for joining me today. I'm Madeline Blair, and this is Unlocked. You know, you can't have a successful career without knowing how to deal with the unexpected. This show is all about opening possibilities so that when you're hit with the unexpected, you've got some options to choose from. You know, we all live in and with systems. Our bodies are made up of working parts: eyes, hands, brain, heart. They all work together synergistically so that we're able to do what we wish to do. Organizations are systems too. They're made up of different working parts. There's marketing, and there's manufacturing, and finance, and strategy, and culture, and much more. When they work together synergistically, missions are accomplished, markets are responded to, revenues are achieved. When a part of them is somehow not up to par or are out of the loop of critical information, it is unclear if anything can be accomplished. And if it is, it may not be perfectly consistent with the mission, and the organization is sick. My guest today is Edwin Korver, and we will call this episode Healing Broken Systems. Hello, Edwin.
Hello, Madeline.
Let me introduce you briefly to our audience.
Thank you.
Edwin is the CEO and founder of Cross Silo, a company focused on connecting human systems, and also is the creator of Roundmap, a whole system framework of business. And recently, he helped Fortune 500 companies go through transformative change. Now that's awesome, Edwin.
Thank you. There's a long time going before that actually happened, but it was a nice achievement. Yes.
Good. And change is like that. Indeed. Well, yeah. I'm so excited that you're with me today. As you know, I have been looking forward to this conversation for a long time, and it's great to have you here to do this. I, though, want you to begin by what is it that we mean by a broken system?
Well, first of all, Madeline, thank you for having me on your show. It's an honor. It's a pleasure. We're both attending the course of Steve Denning, and I'm learning a lot from Steve and from Miriam. So it's just an honor again to be here and to talk to you and to have this conversation about healing broken systems.
Yeah.
But so what was your first question? Let's continue.
Well, let's talk about what that means. Why do you call it a broken system?
Right. Okay. Well, there's a long story and there's a short story. But let's stick it to the short one, given the medium. When I was in 1994, I was reading a book. It's called Maverick by Ricardo Semler, and it was a book about an entrepreneur who took over the company of his father. It was quite a big organization, actually. It was about a couple of thousand people in Brazil, and they were working like they would normally do in a traditional way. So there was a hierarchy, there was a command and control structure, and there were people working for a boss. And he became the boss. When his father retired, he took over and he started to lead the company. And as he was leading the company, he had this strange idea about not being the leader and not being the boss. He wanted people to be empowered. He wanted to distribute leadership throughout the organization. He wanted to place people in control instead of being the one that is in control and is in command. And this was so strange. And as I was reading through it, I just became more and more amazed about this almost upside down type of organization. Instead of having this typical like family construct, right? Normally you have your parents and you have children, and that it's normal that there is a feudal system in which you are active, like in the military is. But in organizations, so I started to wonder, when I entered organizations during my career, I started to wonder, why are these organizations structured the way they are? Why is there a command and control? Why is there one person in the organization that has the final say in everything? even though that most people in the organization are far more equipped and far more skilled to make better decisions. So why is it that we think this is normal? So I started to think about this process and started to look at organizations as systems.
Mm.
So and started to wonder, is it possible to have another system instead of this command and control structure? Is there another way of organizing people?
Mm.
Obviously, a lot of organizations experimented with it, like holacracy and sociocracy, and there are different ways of organizing organizations. But I started to find that there wasn't a single way of perceiving business. So I wanted to create a framework that would capture it all. And that took about 8 years. So it was a long time. But so yeah, looking at systems, looking at the way that people collaborate. So let's take, for instance, one of the Fortune 500 companies I helped through change. What I noticed is that not just within that company, because it's not just within that specific company, it was a large technology company in the United States, people were divided. They were divided by departments, divided by product groups, divided by customer groups, divided by whatever. They were divided. And people were dying to work together. They wanted to collaborate. They wanted to bring the best out of themselves and bring the best to the table. And they weren't allowed to. They were only allowed to act within this specific box.
Mm.
And so the box confined everyone. And as you were part of this particular box, people started to develop politics and started to see other people in other boxes as their enemies. And they, and then and they were competing to each other. Instead of bringing out the best of themselves, they started to put a lot of energy in fighting the other group, other departments. And so I found that this company was going through the same thing. We needed to bring different companies together. So it was something like a merger. It wasn't actually a merger, but it was just bringing two companies together. So there were two cultures, and these two cultures had totally different views of what is important, about what they valued, the way they worked. Their whole mode of operation was totally different. So how can you bring two large organizations together and form one new group? And I just found that even within this small group, the system was already broken. So I needed to bring together two broken systems. So what you end up is an even more broken system. So I learned, I teach them about what could happen if they started to work together. And so this is where I applied what is called appreciative inquiry. And I think we share that because you have a lot of experience with appreciative inquiry. So what is your idea about appreciative inquiry and using positive change in organizations?
Well, that's such a difficult question. It's a difficult question, and it's a very easy question because you can answer it simply, which I will do. But it actually is a philosophy. It means that whenever we are discussing something, we will tend to focus on what will create life. It's called generative. So if I ask you a question about a problem, then all we think about is problems and kind of go down that hole. Rather, if I say to you, what did you do today that was really exciting and that you were very proud of? All of a sudden, all your energy goes up and you're ready to move on. So that's, to me, is the real big difference between ordinary and appreciative.
I agree. I think it's a game changer. When I noticed this, again, when I did all the training and helped people to prepare for what you normally call a summit, we got about 150 people in a room.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't a lot of cooperation and collaboration in the room. There wasn't a lot of hope. There wasn't a lot of excitement. The opposite.
Yeah.
And 2 days later, I noticed people work together almost like children. They were playing, they were creating, they were having fun. It was a total transformation, which already happened because we had gone through interviews and all kinds of stuff to have people to get to know each other a little better. So transformation was already going on. Still, when we get them in a room, person to person, it became a different ball game. So at first they were anxious. And at the end of 2 days, they were transformed. So, and it was actually this moment that I was sitting in a room watching people transform. from being totally divided and then become a unity and find commonality and in their beliefs, in their thinking. It is that moment that I found hope that there are ways to organize and to work together and to structure in better ways than we have been doing. And for some organizations, it will be really difficult to heal these broken systems because there's a lot of power play going on. There's a lot of politics in organizations. There's a lot of loyalty. There's a lot of people that tend to lose positions of power. So I get it. It's a long trail, but I think it's really important to have a view which is much longer, much further down the road than something that is achievable or something that you can do tomorrow. But my view is there is hope. And as long as there is hope, I think you need to pay and you need to contribute and do everything you can as a human being to make it happen.
I love that you have used the word hope, because that's not something that people generally talk about when they're talking about organizations. It rarely comes in. And yet, when people they feel cramped or dissatisfied or frustrated, they lose hope. And if you can restore that, it just takes it. It's enormously different in the organization. I often ask teenagers to give me questions for the show because they always see the world differently, right? This is one of the questions that they asked, and I think it's appropriate right now. Can the work that you do, can it also help a company anticipate and embrace change?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Change is a mindset. So it's what most organizations do. If we go back to the traditional way of organizing, it is mostly, we come from a period of mass production, right? And mass production means that we're trying to produce for a predictable demand. And so everything is set to make the whole operation as efficient and people as productive as possible. So everything is in place to keep this machine going. And in this machine, every person in this machine is like a cog in the wheel, right? So the only thing that you try to do is you bring your best game, whatever that is, within this box, and you try to do whatever you need to do, and then on the end of the day you leave. You cannot change it because it's still, you're producing for a predictable future. And so as long as that's the case, as long as there's demand that's predictable, it seems fine to organize in this way, to organize based on efficiency, based on productivity, and to make profit. Mm-hmm. If you live in a time, what we call VUCA, right? This with a lot of velocity, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. These times are so complex that the predictability of the future is almost none. So we have no clue what's going to happen tomorrow, let alone happen in 5 years. So to plan for consistency and continuity doesn't make sense. So the only thing, so what you see now happening is a lot of companies are just producing stock because nobody's buying anymore. But they refuse to see that producing stock doesn't help them. So stock pile up until they cannot sell it anymore. And then they come to a point in which, okay, we cannot sell it, so let's sell it cheap. And so price comes down and we get deflation, et cetera, and then we get into a crisis. So when you set for the fact, when you realize and when you acknowledge the fact that VUCA times demand a different approach to systems, that the way that we need to organize is for change. We need to change. We need to make sure that whatever happens in the market, we first to hear and first to interpret and to look for new ways to create value. So it is a mind shift, shifting from continuity and consistency to creativity and curiosity, etc. Words that you associate with resilience in your book. So, yeah, you can plan for change in systems and make sure that systems are in place to create, especially create customer value, because that's now the focus of most businesses, or should be the focus of most businesses.
Should be. That's right. Well,
Love the question.
we we began, or you began rather, talking about that book called Maverick, and leading you to an 8-year journey. Uh, was there anything else that drew you to this particular arena of work that you're doing?
Oh yeah, well, I think that probably goes back to my childhood. Um, I have a strong sense of what I call equitability. And to explain that word, equitability is not the same as equality. Equitability means that you have a fair chance,
Yeah.
like stocks. If you're a shareholder, you have equity. Equity means that you have a stake in the future of the company. So equitability is all about having a stake in your future and having a chance to have a bright future. So I believe there should be equitability for all, whether you're an employee or whether you're at school or whether you in what capacity, it doesn't really matter. I think everyone should have an equitable chance to develop themselves. And it is this equitability that made me work towards an understanding of how these systems operate, that they, one way or another, don't provide this sense of equitability to their employees. So I wanted to find, well, what is wrong with these systems? Where are we going wrong that we cannot bring out the best in ourselves? Why people are distrusted? Why people are not empowered? Don't have the autonomy to make their decisions, their own decisions. So what is wrong with our systems that we don't trust grown-up people, educated people, to make the best decisions possible for their customers, for themselves, for their group, for their team, for the company, and for society, right? So what is wrong with our systems that we don't give people an equitable chance to bring out the best of themselves? And obviously that didn't just came out of an urge from something that was in my background. Equitability is really important to me, but actually got me going and got me to stop down this rat race of what most people are doing, right? Trying to get a career and make more money, bigger house, bigger cars, etc., and just impress other people, and not necessarily be more happy. What got me going was that I went through cancer twice. I had leukemia twice. And when I started to realize that the only reason why I survived, and I survived chemo treatment, was because people donated their blood. They had donated their blood anonymously. There was nobody that put my name on a sack of blood saying, this is for Edwin. This is for him to survive. It was out of care and love for other people that made me survive. So it's still yeah. So this is my way of giving back to what people gave to me. So my time, I'm living on borrowed time. So I'm just glad that I had the chance to do something that was of value to me, and hopefully is of value to others, because that's why
I think so. Well, in our earlier conversations, you've talked about the importance of the higher self. Why is this part of your work?
Oh, well, preparing for this conversation that we have, I just received a newsletter from Jill Conrad, and I think she's the #1 salesperson, B2B salesperson on LinkedIn, and she wrote, whenever we set a goal for ourselves, the first thing she was thinking about, it need to be smart, because she's a smart woman, right? So it needed to be smart. Smart is an abbreviation, an acronym for the words that it's timely, it is specific, etc. So, and then she said, this is not something that is aspiring. This is something that keeps you going. This isn't something that gets you out of bed in the morning. This isn't something that will provide you hope. This is something. So if you really want to be excited, if you really want to care, if you really deep, you need to have something which is much higher. So you need to set yourself a higher goal. So as I was writing a blog post in preparation of our conversation, I started to realize that what I was doing and what we should all do and what you are doing, Madeline, in your capacity as a talk show host, but also as one of the directors of the World Bank, is that you bring out the best in yourself. And I think so. And you need to bring out the best in yourself to bring out the best in others.
Yeah.
I think it's our first and foremost responsibility to bring out, to learn, to get a better understanding of what it is that we need, that we can bring to the table. What are our strengths? What can we create? What are our opportunities? What are the possibilities? If only we were to connect to another person. So it isn't just by ourselves. It is in the group dynamics, in the social construct that we live, that we can bring out the best of ourselves.
Edwin, there's a point you just made, which I want to emphasize, that you've got to discover yourself those strengths. I mean, it's easy to say that, be who you are or be yourself or whatever, but you have to take the time to discover who this person is.
Absolutely.
Whether it's observing yourself, because I believe that's a part of it,
Yep.
Or whether it's asking friends to give you feedback, in many ways.
So I love reading your book and on this moment of reflection and silence. And so I think I think that's what I've been doing in the last couple of years. In most cases, people probably, when I go out in the garden and to work in the garden, maybe an hour or two, I'm thinking, I'm contemplating, I'm reflecting, I'm learning. Whenever I take a shower and when the water falls on me, I'm thinking, I'm reflecting. I'm always reflecting. I'm always trying to get a deeper understanding of what it is, what solutions can we create, and what is. It is not so matter what is the problem, because there's always a challenge. There's always a problem. I'm not trying to fix problems. The only thing I'm trying to describe is there are flaws in the system. How can I make these flaws irrelevant? How can I create a system that is helping people to bring out the best in themselves? How can I so that they can bring out the best in themselves, so they can reach the higher self? And again, my higher self, sometimes you have to go through hardship to get to an understanding of what it means. Not to get a bigger car, not to get a big house,
Yes,
but to get somebody else smiling. I know one day at one of my companies, I created magnets. So these were fridge magnets. And so I came to I just made I got in contact with a cinema director. And we concluded that we would take The Hunchback as a movie and we would create a fridge magnet for The Hunchback. And so we created the fridge magnet, and then we had there was this premiere, right? And then there were a lot of children showing up, and we would hand out, when they came out of the cinema, that we hand out for free a fridge magnet of the movie. And there was this girl, and she dropped her magnet on the floor, and she lost it, because as the children were coming out of the cinema, they walked over her magnet, and she started to cry. So I walked up to one of the hostess that were presenting these children with a magnet, and she gave the magnet back to her, a new magnet. And I just noticed her tears dry up, and I watched my wife and I said, "This is the best thing I've done in my life." So and years later, sitting in this Fortune 500 company, see 150 people going through a process of transformation and cheering and finding joy in each other company. That was a second moment, a high moment in my life. But this singular moment of this child appreciating a gift that was so dear to her, and it meant nothing to me. Yeah. It didn't cost me any money. It was just something that I could give. And she gave me back so much just by watching her cry and a tear dries up. Yeah. Beautiful.
I hate to shift gears right now, but I want to, because I really want to reinforce the reason why it is important for us to be moving past this centuries-old command and control.
Yeah.
And you and I know it's began many centuries ago. And it's almost like, as you described the family, we got kind of accustomed to a hierarchy. But there are threads, there are trends, there are cultural changes that mean we've got to change that. What are your thoughts on that? What is it that's really driving this?
Well, first of all, I think that there's a younger generation now that is refusing this system of command and control, and is also refusing. If there's research that said 75% of people around the world believe that it's totally normal that businesses lie to their customers.
Yeah.
24% of workers, employees within companies believe that their CEO isn't lying to their customers. So it is. We live in times of great distress. We live in times of very low trust levels. Our trust in institutions has never been as low as it is today. So trust has come down. We have a new generation, a younger generation, that doesn't buy the bullshit. Sorry for the word, but of the corporate world. They oppose the environmental pollution. They oppose the effects on nature and on climate, whether you believe it or not. But they are rallying for change, and they're now about 50%, almost 55% of the workforce. So they are starting to create a momentum for organizations to change, to no longer be in this command and control structure, this hierarchy of this one person on the top, this king or ruler or ape on the rock. So I think that the conditions are there for change to happen, because again, a larger workforce are looking for change, and the way that they work together, the way they've studied is different than we studied before. Normally, when we went to school, we just listened. No, we never spoke to our teacher with his first name. It's almost like Mister, we're respectful. And these children, they learn in circles, in groups. They learn each other. So their way of upbringing and way of being taught is different than we come accustomed. And when they enter these organizations, they go like, what's happening here? We don't understand it. This is not the way that we would like to work. So they start a movement of change. And I think so it's the time of change is there. I think it's the right time. The only thing that we need to go through is crisis. And I'm really saying to social, we have to go through crisis. We have to go through an enormous recession, because that's the only way things are going to change. Because the only way people are going to let go of power is when there is no more holding on. And the only escape is to acknowledge that the leader of the company is not going to come with a solution. He doesn't have the vision to explain what the company needs to go through. So,
there's another aspect to this that you're kind of, I think, is implied, and that is that the kinds of issues that we're dealing with today, like climate change, are incredibly complex.
Right. Absolutely.
And if we don't draw the best from absolutely everyone, we may never solve that problem, simply because it's too big and too complex. And I love the fact your earlier work, you were talking about helping the person bring their very best.
The highest self. Again, I just posted on LinkedIn a very simple statement in which I said, when the complexity exceeds our comprehension and control, we call it a crisis. So we're in a poly crisis. We're just stacking crisis on top of crisis. Yes. It is not because it's a crisis. It is just because we don't understand. So we need to raise our understanding. So how can we raise our understanding? Is to incorporate all the bright minds that we have, whether in organizations, whether in communities, whether in government. We need to get everyone included, because we need all those bright minds to help us to find a solution.
Yeah. The word crisis is one that we really cringe when we think about crisis. Two thoughts come to mind. One is that I'm a gardener too. And I know that when you plant a plant,
Yeah.
you the last thing you do before you water it is you push on around the roots. You push it because roots grow against pressure. Okay, so we need pressure. The other thought that comes to mind is that we recently went through a crisis. It was called a pandemic. Now, as horrible as it was, and as tragic as it was it actually created an acceptance of people doing exactly what you and I are doing, talking virtually. I mean, I've been working in this for, I hate to tell you, but 40 years. And it was terrible in the beginning. Nobody wanted to do it.
It doesn't show.
Thank you. But now it's a very accepted thing. So it brought a change through a crisis. So I want us to give ourselves some hope that, okay, it may be unpleasant, but there is something that comes out of it, or can come out of it.
I'm very hopeful. I'm extremely hopeful that we will sort it out, that all these crises will, by race understanding, will get to a resolve. So we will get there. We always get there. Yeah. Whenever I'm in a crisis, because crisis hits you whenever a crisis hits you, I always pick myself a period in time, 10 years ahead. Mm-hmm. And 10 years ahead, I'm reflecting on what's happening today. And I will see myself sitting in a chair laughing at it, because it was just a ripple in time. But simply by the fact that I'm projecting myself 10 years ahead means that there is a 10 years ahead.
Yes.
So there is hope.
There is
I
hope.
just need to go through this period.
Yeah.
So I think that's what most organizations need to understand, is that vision isn't simply vision because it's some kind of projection or some kind of idea about the future. It is about creating hope. It is about creating an understanding of what lies ahead. So you get this idea of the whatever I'm trying to create is there. The only thing I need to do is to make it happen.
Yeah.
So make change happen. It's just the change in itself. It will happen. No matter how much resistance, it will happen because it needs to happen. Yeah. And it needs to happen because you have already envisioned it. Mm-hmm. So I think vision as a way of bringing out your higher self is critical in all organizations, and it's the least educated part of MBAs. There's hardly any education on creating vision.
Ah.
So it isn't strange that most companies have leaders that don't have a vision and don't care about vision. They care about strategy. They care about the mission, about efficiency and productivity and profitability. Mm-hmm. But they don't really care about the vision. Why should they? They're on a roll. And now things are going dire, and we're in a downturn. And so what now? What next? And everybody looks up to the leader and says, so what's next? How does the future look like? Because I'm anxious, I'm fearful. I see what's happening around me. Mm-hmm. So what next? And this leader goes, I haven't been educated. I haven't been taught about vision. I don't know. I just started this business and it just happened to work. So I think to get a good understanding of what the creation of vision and the importance of vision. And I think that's one of the things that I learned from positive change, is that by coming together and to get people to lift themselves up, to dream, to imagine a future, you're creating a future. The only thing you need to do is to bring all these stories together and say, okay, this is what we envision as a group. You don't need to do it as a leader. The only thing you need to do is to make sure that people bring it together and have conversations, open conversations, and talk to each other and explain and dream and imagine.
Yes.
And whatever you do that, change is going to happen because you create hope. And that will take you further.
Definitely. I love this about vision because you mentioned Steve Denning earlier. Well, he and I, many years ago, had conversations around future stories, because I'm big on future stories.
I noticed in your book, yeah. I love it.
If you can envision it and describe it in a story, then people can see themselves in that story, and it pulls them to it. And Steve and I didn't always agree, but eventually he said that he thought that I had something to say. You
Sometimes
know,
he wasn't too keen when I suggested the title "Healing Broken Systems." He said, "No, that's negative. Broken, that is negative." But I know healing is positive, broken is negative. I know that, but you need to make people aware that whatever we're doing isn't normal.
isn't normal.
We just grew accustomed, but it
Yeah.
isn't normal. It isn't human.
Interesting contrast. It may be normal because it's accustomed to it. We're just accustomed to it. But it doesn't have to be. And it probably shouldn't be the normal. Great. Well, speaking of normal, and Steve, he often talks about the customers, that the customer really is the major focus. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, when I started creating Roundmap, the first thing I focused on was creating value for customers.
Mm,
So I read books like from Michael Porter, from Peter Drucker, and I read a lot of books, all the management theory that I could read on. But I learned from Michael Porter that creating value chains was the core of business. We now call it a business model, right? But it's just a value chain. It is a series of steps to create value for customers. In the beginning, our focus was on creating profit, right? So a business model, even the word business model, implies that we're looking for the value that we create for the business. I very much like the perception of what we call a value stream. It is looking from the customer point of view, or the job to be done theory, which is a great theory. Whenever you have time, just look it up. I think it's a great theory. It is looking from the customer point of view. What is it that we want to create for the customer? Because in essence, if we want to bring out a higher self, it is what we give to others that gives us a sense of happiness, of joy, of pleasure. It is giving is what makes us heal. That's the only way we do it. So if we want to heal broken systems, we need to give to customers. And whatever customers value, that is what we need to do. That is our purpose as an organization. So the line between customers and the organization is what's called the front line, right? So I think the front line is what I call the ultimate level of truth. Whatever happens in the organization, that's the ultimate level. If you're incapable of creating value for customers, if you're incapable of satisfying your customers and creating significant value for their customers, then you have no place in business. You're irrelevant. You're futile. So you need to make sure that this space, this small space between the frontline operation of your organization and the customer, this is the place where it all happens. Your communication, everything relates to this process. Everything behind it, every part of your value chain, your supply chain, whatever you're trying to do, is all irrelevant if you don't succeed at this level. So customers and giving to your customers, creating for your customers, honoring whatever you promise to your customers, those are all part of the purpose of your business, is to create a customer, to keep a customer, and to please a customer. And only then the customer returns. So the customer is the core of your operation. There's no other purpose for an organization than to create and keep a customer, as Peter Drucker stated. So the customer is central to everything. It is not profit. It is not business. Those are consequences, right? Profit is a consequence of whatever you're trying to create. So the customer is, for me, it is key to business. It is not the most important thing to business. The most important thing to business is the employee's health. So if employees are capable of giving the best, their best, making the decision that is best for the customers, allowing them to give their best, they will outperform any expectation. But if you try to contain them, if you limit them, if you silence them, if you blind them, if you muzzle them, I don't know why business operations do it in this way, but then you get broken systems, and you'll never be able to mend them. So the customer, again, is first and foremost. And in the digital age, due to the rise of social media, it became clear to companies that whenever you fail in this respect, in this ultimate level of truth, everyone knows. and this is hurting. It's hurting your reputation. It's hurting the business. So now, only because it is hurtful for the business, companies started to pay more attention to whatever they're trying to promise to the customers and make up to it. Now social media is getting less attention, and I'm also seeing a reverse in this process. Companies started to care less about their reputation because the effects of negative words in social media isn't that negative and impactful on the organization itself. So now we need to move from an intrinsic motivation, not about an extrinsic motivation, the motivation of don't hurt our reputation. It should be from the inside out. It should be because we care. We deeply care about the customer, deeply care about the value that we create. And only then companies will be successful in the digital age.
I want to shift to another aspect, but it's kind of implied in what you're talking about. And that's the critical aspect of your approach when you talk about the value of relationships. In my experience, people really don't fully understand what that means in terms of work relationships. Let's expand on that a bit, because I think that's very much at the heart of creating what you're talking about.
I think one of the authors that really understood this process is John Gordon. He wrote a book about positive teams and how they affect. And he said there are a couple of steps to get people to really care about customers. And the first thing you need to do is to communicate. Communication is your first step. You really need to have in-depth conversation with each other. Show that your interest in the other person. Only then you can create what we call a level of understanding, rapport with the other person. So it starts with communication. Then there's another level which then creates a kind of commitment. The commitment, because we now understand the other person and we understand what motivates the other person, we can start to commit to the relationship with the other person. And when we commit to the other relationship, we start to care. We start to care because we have a deeper understanding of the other person, about our relationship and the value of our relationship, about what the other person values and what we can do to help the other person achieve their goals, and then commit to what we want to achieve within this relationship, so that we care as a group for what we're trying to achieve. And John Gordon looked at a lot of, especially sports teams, how they came about. And he had this wonderful story about a group, I think about basketball players. And they went they got into a final and then they lost. And another year they came back in the final and they lost again. And then this coach, he called everyone in a hotel room and he said, "Do you think you're the best team?" And they said, "Well, yeah, we're the best team." And he said, "Do you think you have the best in heart of your fellow player?" And they say, "Yes, we think we have the best in heart." And then he said, "How much of you have a deep understanding of the background of your fellow players? Do you know about their wives and their children, where they go to school and whether they were sick and how they recuperated and everything? How much of you have a deep understanding of whatever happens in the lives of your fellow players?" And most said, "I have no clue." And then he said, "So how can you commit yourself to a team and care deeply for the other player if you don't care about the things that are most important to your fellow players?" So I think if you're in an organization, if you have no clue who's sitting in a room next to you, if you don't understand their background, if you never took time to have a good conversation about whatever happens in their lives, you can never build a relationship that's built on commitment or even caring. So I think you need to do the first step. You need to take the time to sit down, have coffee, have lunch, take time and have a conversation, ask questions, listen to each other, try to understand whatever motivates the other person, because only then you start to care for the other person enough to commit yourself to that relationship. It is John Gordon, one of my teachers.
Great. Oh, I love it. And I love the fact that you keep referencing books, and, which is great for our audience, because then they can go and
take a look at it.
Area of interest. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love the fact that you begin with understanding something about the person. I happen to think that one of the I'll call it the unexpected consequences, but it's a very positive consequence of the intensity that we have used Zoom in the last few years is that we've discovered that people have children that walk around, they have pets.
Yeah.
And at first, people were embarrassed, oh, I'm sorry, and eventually people began to recognize, now this is life.
Yeah.
And you knew that person had a cat or whatever. Yeah. And it builds a connection. It somehow builds a connection. And I think that's where you use the word care, and it's true. When you have suddenly feel there is a connection with someone, then you can care about them. It doesn't mean that it is an emotional thing.
Yeah.
But it's caring, and you just made that decision. It's also very beneficial to building resilience, because highly resilient people have social support.
Absolutely.
And if you have no connections with people, no relationships with people, where are you going to get the support you need? So
throughout my 8 years working on this, I didn't have a lot of support in the beginning. I had a lot of support because I was just committed to a single part of the business and a single part of the dynamics of the whole system, and then kind of lost it. I lost the group that I had. I had a group of about 150 people that were really deep into what I was doing, my inner circle. And the circle just shrank as I started to investigate into more and more complex things. So as the complexity grew, I lost more and more people. And I think one of the questions that Steve asked during one of the sessions was, how do we bring this perception of integral thinking to an audience? And I said, well, the things that you need to do is that you need to understand that there's no single stakeholder. The CEO doesn't have a full understanding of the business.
Yeah.
At all, So if there's no stakeholder you can go to and to make them understand that to understand the system, you need to understand the whole system.
Yeah.
You need to engage the whole system. What is the whole system? How does it? What are the interconnections? What are the interdependencies? So how does it work? So to bring that understanding to an audience. So I said, if there's not a stakeholder, you need to create it. Mm-hmm. And how do you create it? Well, I found that positive inquiry, what I call positive inquiry, which is called appreciative inquiry, is a great way to get the whole system involved. Mm-hmm. And once they from this coming together and this creation of these aspirational outcomes, they then need to create these projects. And as they create the project, these projects will impact all kinds of departments. So now a small group of people need to understand the impact of whatever they're trying to change on all the aspects of a business. So how do you do that? You need to have a holistic perspective. You need to understand the whole of business. Mm-hmm. So you need to create a stakeholder, because there is no single stakeholder that has an understanding of the whole system.
So a process. Well, I hate to say this, but we're almost out of time. And yeah. Edwin, I have 3 more questions I wanted to ask you. So I think we're going to have to schedule you back.
Oh, I love to. So there's so much we can both learn. I learned from you. I learned from your book. I learned from Steve. I learned from John Gordon and Ricardo Semler and Peter Druck and all these people. There's so many bright minds, and all we can do is stand on the shoulders of other people. And I'm so fortunate fortunate enough to live on borrowed time and to be able to get to a deeper understanding. And the funny thing is, this whole process of broken systems started with Adam Smith. Adam Smith introduced this whole idea of division of labor and specialization. And yeah. Adam Smith was born, or at least baptized, on my birthday, and he died on my wife's birthday.
Wow.
So when I learned about that, I started to understand that maybe one of my drives might be to correct but even before that, before he wrote The Wealth of Nations, he had another book on morals and ethics, in which he explained that breaking up work into smaller parts isn't necessarily going to bring health to people. Yeah. People become alienated, get distracted, again, get bored, etc., etc. So we've gone through that. We've seen it happen. We need to fix it.
We need to fix it. Now, speaking of fixing it, let me ask you, do you have any final words, just to recap something quick?
I think the most important thing, what I love to do, and I would like to invite the audience to think deeply, and to come up with the idea, what is my highest self? What is my highest self? What is it that I hold most dearly to my heart? And then if you get to that understanding, what is the single step, or what is necessary? What is the single step I can take to get closer to that higher self? What is it that I need to do? Or what is it that needs to happen? Or what needs to exist for my higher self to really express itself? That is what I would like people to do, is to get to that understanding. Again, hardship got me to my position. You don't need to go to hardship to get a deeper understanding of your higher self. So think of that process. What is it that I really want to achieve, that I crave for, that I live for? What is it? And what needs to happen? What needs to exist? What can I do? What small step can I make to get a little bit closer to what I'm envisioning?
Fantastic. Excellent advice. And I'm going to invite the audience as well, that if there's something you would like to share with Edwin, just send an email to me and it will get to him, not to worry.
I love to read them.
I think it would be great to hear comments on that. Edwin, this has been a joy talking with you. Such a pleasure.
It was an honor, and I thank you for the fact that you just invited me. I just, again, I'm learning so much, and to be given the opportunity to speak out, to show my higher self is marvelous. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, goodness. I always hate to leave those discussions because they're so good, but we have one more thing to do today, and that is to talk about a book of impact. Now, recently, one of my guests, Tuan Ho, used the phrase, making kindness fun and cool. And when I asked him about this, he said that we often feel we must be nice to others, and so we avoid saying what is really on our mind. And he says, this does no kindness to the person because the truth is hidden. He thinks we should try to be kind, which means to be honest in a manner that gives the person the truth without judgment. I mean, we're being kind by helping them in the long run rather than being nice to them in the short run. Now, in his book, Ed Catmull says, it's not the manager's job to prevent risks. It's the manager's job to make it safe for others to take them. Now, if you haven't heard of Ed Catmull, this is his book, Creativity, Inc., Overcoming the Unseen Forces That Stand in the Way of True Inspiration. What a perfect complement to what Edwin has been talking about today, about getting to the higher self and being able to express it. So whenever I talk with someone like Edwin, I'm always delighted that there are leaders who see the whole picture, the picture that puts all the players into the field of vision and can speak to how to pull all the players into the field of action as well. That's why I had to talk about Ed Catmull's book that looked carefully at how you lead a company from one success to another, and Pixar certainly falls into that category. Catmull's techniques were familiar to my thinking, but he gave me a word that for something that is striven for over and over again. He used the word candor. As he says in the book, candor is forthrightness or frankness and communicates not just truth-telling, but a lack of reserve. I found that using a word that is not commonly used is actually refreshing because it comes without the weakness that comes when a word is so overused that it's lost its original meaning. And I want you to think of a word like that. And I would say one of those words is friend. Think of Tuan's word, kindness, and how it relates to the long term. You know, the silent but operative word in both cases, candor and kindness, is judgment. We express ourselves with candor while offering no judgment other than it is our impression, which can be as wrong as it can be right. In an organization, reinforcing the use of candor is what Catmull says is key to his job. It is to make sure that the staff of Pixar can say what they believe about something without being fearful. It is a compact for meetings that is protected and upheld. And there is no retaliation or resentment for something someone says, which gives freedom for those who are asked their opinions to give them without qualms and with kindness. As I listened to what Edwin was saying, creating this kind of environment is part of what comes from building relationships. And as I thought about what I have said about resilience, creating that kind of environment is part of what creates relationships that offers social support to the members and actually encourages resilience. Creativity Inc. by Ed Catmull. It may be 9 years old, but it is still vibrant in its messaging. If you would like to know more about the show, please go to madelineblair.com/unlockedtv, and you can see all the previous shows. And if you'd like to explore the topic with me, just email me at madeline@madelineblair.com. What a show. What a conversation. I'm Madeline Blair, wishing you infinite possibilities as you unlock your